The village of Karanpur lay in the shadow of ancient traditions, where the wind carried whispers of forgotten curses. Its narrow, cobbled streets wound between weathered houses, their walls streaked with moss and secrets. On Lohri night, the air grew dense with the weight of unspoken fears. It was a night meant for celebrating light, yet in Karanpur, it carried the burden of darkness. Generations of villagers told the story of Nale, the wandering bride who haunted the outskirts of the village. They spoke of her with a mixture of reverence and dread, recounting the cautionary tale to wide-eyed children huddled by the fire. Nale, they said, came knocking at doors on nights when the festival bonfires burned bright. She whispered sweet promises, her voice as soft as a lover's plea. Those who opened their doors found only death waiting beyond the threshold. Rajesh, a young reporter from the city, arrived in Karanpur just as the sun dipped below the horizon. He was drawn not by belief in the supernatural but by the tantalizing allure of a story that could make his career. Urban legends intrigued him, and Nale was among the most infamous. He believed there was a logical explanation, something rooted in psychology or human folly. The villagers were eager to share their tales, though their voices carried the weight of caution. "Write what you want," said an elderly man named Balram, his milky eyes staring into Rajesh's. "But don't stay the night. Lohri isn't for outsiders here." Rajesh dismissed the warning with a polite nod, his notebook already filling with details of the bride's ghostly lore. She had once been a beautiful woman, forced into a marriage she did not want. Betrayed and humiliated, she was said to have cursed the village before hanging herself from the ancient banyan tree on the outskirts. Since then, she had returned to every Lohri, seeking revenge on those who ignored her plight in life. By nightfall, the village transformed. Bonfires blazed in courtyards, and the sound of toll drums echoed through the lanes. Families huddled together, their doors adorned with fresh turmeric and garlands of marigold. But amid the celebration, there was an air of unease. "Nale, they wrote on their doors in bold letters. "Come tomorrow." Rajesh, undeterred by superstition, ventured into the darkened fields with his camera and flashlight. He wanted authenticity, proof to debunk the myth. The banyan tree loomed ahead, its twisted roots clawing at the earth. A strange chill ran down his spine as he approached, but he shook it off. "Just the wind," he muttered. The air around the tree was unnaturally still. He examined its gnarled trunk, searching for remnants of the story. A faint smell of burnt wood lingered, as though the fires of old had imprinted themselves on the place. Then he heard it, a soft, melodic hum. It was faint, almost blending with the rustling leaves, but unmistakable. He swung his flashlight toward the sound, his heart pounding. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, draped in red and gold. Her veil fluttered in the wind, though no breeze touched Rajesh's skin. He felt an inexplicable pull, a yearning to step closer. The woman's head tilted, her features obscured by the shadows of her veil. "Will you listen to my story?" she asked, her voice tender yet laced with sorrow. Rajesh's instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet remained rooted. "Who are you?" he managed to ask, his voice cracking. The woman took a step closer, her bare feet silent on the dry leaves. "I was a bride once," she said, "but they stole my joy, my dreams. They left me to hang, swinging like a broken doll." Her voice grew sharper, angrier. "And now they mock me with their festivals, their bonfires. But you've come to listen." Rajesh's hand fumbled for his camera, desperate to capture her image. But when he raised it, the lens cracked, the glass splintering under an unseen force. He staggered back, his flashlight flickering. The woman laughed, a sound that chilled his blood. "You can't trap me in your little box, city boy. But you've seen me. That's enough." The next moment she was gone. The clearing fell silent, as though she had never been there. Trembling, Rajesh stumbled back toward the village, his mind racing. Was it a hallucination? A trick of his imagination? But the crack in his camera lens told him otherwise. The streets of Karanpur were eerily empty. The bonfires had burned low, their embers casting weak, flickering shadows. He reached the house where he had rented a room, finding the door ajar. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of jasmine. A woman's silhouette lingered near the window, her veil illuminated by the moonlight. "You followed me," she said without turning. Rajesh froze. "What do you want from me?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The woman turned, and for the first time, he saw her face. It was a grotesque amalgamation of beauty and decay, her features twisted as if they belonged to both the living and the dead. Her eyes burned with an unnatural light. "I want them to know my pain. I want them to remember, and you will help me." The room plunged into darkness. Rajesh felt a cold hand on his chest, pressing down as though to crush his heart. He gasped for air, his vision blurring. Just as consciousness slipped away, her voice echoed in his mind. "Tomorrow, they will know." When Rajesh awoke, the sun was rising, casting a pale light over the village. He staggered outside, his body aching as though he had been beaten. The villagers stared at him, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and pity. "You saw her," Balram said solemnly. "You're marked now." Rajesh tried to explain, to find logic in the events of the night, but his words faltered as he noticed the marks on his chest, dark bruises in the shape of fingers. Desperation clawed at him. He wanted to leave to escape the nightmare, but a part of him felt tethered to the village, as if the bride's curse had ensnared him. That night, as the bonfires were lit once more, Rajesh stood among the villagers. The drumming was frantic, the chants louder as though they could ward off the inevitable. He saw the fear in their eyes, the way they clung to their rituals like lifelines. Yet he knew it was futile. The first scream pierced the night like a blade. It came from the far end of the village, where a young couple had ignored the warnings and left their door unmarked. Rajesh ran toward the sound, his flashlight bouncing in his trembling hand. He found the couple's bodies sprawled on the floor, their faces frozen in terror. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air. As the night wore on, more screams echoed through the village. The bride moved like a shadow, unstoppable and unseen. Rajesh found himself in the center of it all, a reluctant witness to the carnage. He realized her vengeance was not random, it was calculated. Those who had mocked her memory, who had turned her tragedy into a cautionary tale, were her targets. By dawn, the village was a husk of its former self. The streets were littered with the dead, their bodies twisted in unnatural poses. Rajesh sat by the dying embers of a bonfire, his mind shattered by the horrors he had witnessed. He felt the weight of her presence still lingering, as though she watched him from the shadows. He left Karampur that day, vowing never to return. But the curse of Nale followed him. In every whisper of the wind, every knock at his door, he felt her presence. He tried to write about what he had seen, to warn others, but the words refused to come. Instead, he became a ghost of his former self, haunted by a bride who would never rest. To this day, on Lohri nights, the villagers of Karampur still write Nale on their doors. But they know it is only a fragile shield against a grief so deep, it refuses to be silenced. And somewhere, in the quiet hours of the night, a bride waits, her veil fluttering in a wind that carries the scent of jasmine and death.